Future Biophysics, Superfit tree formulas. Been an extraordinary experience to realize after many years of working with the flower formulas and complete harmony, realizing and thinking that this was the ultimate in vibrational formulas of flower essences. It rapidly became very apparent that as people became sicker in the world, that our formulas required more and more complex combinations in order to reach and help people. And it became obvious to me that we had to look further and look deeper. And after a series of extraordinary experiences and dreams, I was led to various parts of the world to make this incredible discovery about the sacred trees. And so I'm going to talk to you about the tree formulas, but I'm also going to tell you a little bit about the story, about how they came about and the travels and the extraordinary adventures that I had in order to accumulate enough energetic property from various trees and plants to create this new range. It was an interesting story and an interesting history as well, because primarily the Superfit tree formulas were created for the horses, for the equine world, realizing that horses, exquisitely beautiful, sacred creatures around the world, were really under huge torment and distress. And so my idea was to create a range of these incredibly powerful formulas for the trees, from the trees for the horses. And interestingly enough, I went to Dubai to meet up with Sheikh Mohammed and his team. And it was very fascinating because they were very badly labeled. They weren't labeled nicely at all. They were labeled in a rather dark, sort of black with gold labels, but they had numbers on them. And I had a discussion with a team of vets and people from the stables. And I said, no, this is the one that you need for this, and this is the one you need for this other experience. And they all got terribly muddled and confused, and they didn't really relate to the formulas at all. And it was actually incredibly sad. And when I came back from Dubai, I had the most, extraordinary dream, vision almost, of the 9 guides who stood around me in these beautiful metallic coats, all the colors of the rainbow reflecting off each other and the energy bouncing off their coats. And they said, look, we're not dressed properly. We are here to form the support for mankind, but our clothes are wrong, our coats are wrong, and you need to reevaluate these incredibly important and powerful formulas. And so I suddenly realized that the labels of these formulas were totally, totally wrong, and created with a very clever man these beautiful rainbow codes for our formulas with the Fibonacci code in them. But then realized that we were missing 3 energies: violet, green, and I think, silver, which came later. So that was really the origin of the labeling of these beautiful, these beautiful formulas for the support of these noble creatures. But I suddenly thought, no, it's not just for the horses, these are for humanity as well. So that was really the beginning of why we then took a new step forward into creating tree formulas. It became incredibly apparent that these 10 tree formulas were not just the colors of the rainbow, but they were what we would call plexus formulas in Western terminology, or chakra formulas if we were thinking beyond into the ancient mystical philosophies of the colors of the rainbow reflecting through the spine, reflecting through the human body. And so that was really how they started. That was the starting point of these extraordinary formulas. And then from then on, I started to go on my travels. And so I'm now going to put up the PowerPoint so that you can actually see the beauty of these formulas. They're very simple, they're very powerful, and they're very specific. And they should only ever be used on one level at a time. Never use more than 2 tree formulas on the same level. They're too powerful for that. So they have to be used specifically. although they can be combined in the most incredible permutations with flower formulas. So the power of the tree formulas, if you imagine a little daisy and then imagine a beautiful 2,000-year-old tree, the fir cone of a 2,000-year-old pine tree, and then you start to get a concept which is very different in energetic concept with regard to what these trees offer us and the power of what they offer us, the dimension and the vasa quality of the tree formulas penetrating and going on and in. And we therefore call them the spiritual formulas because they work on a very, very interesting level. And fundamentally, although they're not at all for the physical body, they support on such a deep spiritual level that they have the capacity to manifest symptom relief on the physical level very, very quickly. Not because they're treating the physical level, but because they have the capacity to reach the dimension of what we refer to as the relationship between spiritual and degenerative. So when we look at the tree formulas originally, they came about because of this desperate longing to be able to help the animal kingdom, and then realizing that we also needed exactly the same sort of help. So that was the origin of these exquisite, beautiful, beautiful, powerful formulas. So I'm going to share my screen with you now so that you can actually see our PowerPoint. We refer to these tree formulas as the ultimate power of the planet, the exquisite, beautiful, beautiful tree formulas. So starting here, we look at this amazing light shining through the trees. And this is an extraordinarily interesting picture because many people who've seen this picture, and I had it on the wall in my clinic, kept on telling me that they could see the fairy spirits within the trees. And that has actually happened to me often with little children. Sometimes if you look very hard at the flowers, you also can see the little spirits in the flowers. And when I was photographing the flowers, I often found that the energy in my photographs, because I'm not a very good photographer, but the photographs seemed to glow and glisten with a power that was beyond anything that I was capable of achieving. And it was the gift, I think, that I was being given by these amazing, amazing, amazing plants. So the trees. And I went to visit this wonderful place called Mauritius. And I was in the botanical arboretum called, what was it called? Pamplemousse, the Pamplemousse Gardens. And I found this statue. The gift of a useful plant is more precious than the discovery of a gold mine, and a monument more durable than the pyramids. And I was beautifully taken aback by that. And I loved it so much because I utterly believe that this is the truth. The gift of a useful plant is more precious than the discovery of a gold mine, and a monument more durable than the pyramids. That depicts, I think, so powerfully the power of these formulas. Trees, oh my goodness, they are extraordinary. And if you go around the world, I've been fortunate to go to some extremely powerful places and seen in, for example, primary jungle trees that have never been touched by humanity. And they're so exquisite and so powerful and so beautiful and so old. Intriguingly enough, our tree formulas are fundamentally made from acorns and nuts and seeds from very, very old trees. Our first beautiful, beautiful Superfit formula is the rainbow formula. It's called Peak Performance, and it's made from the acorns and the bark from very, very, very old oak tree. In fact, it's considered to be the oldest oak tree in England. What an extraordinarily beautiful tree. You could stand with about 20 people around the base of the tree, and these acorns that are falling from this tree are still producing little seedlings that you can actually see in the grass just underneath the tree. Unbelievable. So that you can imagine that an acorn from a 2,000-year-old tree carries the remedy, the energy of 2,000 years. Superfit Peak Performance, this beautiful rainbow formula, is for the heart, it's for the cardiovascular system, it's for the governor meridian, the conception meridian. It's a meridian formula, again, for the heart meridian, for the lung meridian. Key word is vitality. It's for neurotransmission. Well, neurotransmission is basically how energy flows around our body and is connected and connects our cells, this energetic field forces. And I suppose if you could regard that in terms of explanation as acupuncture meridians, if you like, the traveling of electrical energy, but much more simple, much easier to understand would be just to be talking about the nervous system and how our cells talk to each other, neurotransmission. Conception, exquisitely important. This moment of our lives when we come into this world as ourselves, me, who am I? What am I all about? I am me. I'm completely and utterly, universally specific to myself. And this is the most extraordinary concept that, yes, humanity is based in a situation such as the geometry of the human body, the anatomy and the physiology of the physical body, but it doesn't explain this uniqueness, this spirituality, this absolute ancestral spirituality. And I suppose what we're really trying to explain here is that these formulas almost have the capacity to go back beyond into the concept of our miasm and our inherited imbalances that go back in time into our ancestry for maybe 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, maybe millions of years to create this exquisite, unique person that you are, that I am. I don't know if you ever asked yourself that question, who am I and why am I me? But it's a question that I've asked myself many, many times, especially when I was a little child. I always wanted to know why I was in this world and what life was really all about. So the truth is that this treatment, this formula is very, very important. I was holding a course in, I think it was in Ireland, and one of my practitioners said to me, I want to bring my autistic child to the class. Would that be all right? And I said, yes, no problem at all. We were talking about the trees and this particular formula. They were all in a little row. And this child walked down towards me, came and sat on my lap, stroked my hair, and looked up at me in such a sweet way. And then his eye caught this formula. And he looked at it. And his eyes lit up and he took it and he put it against his heart. And he said, this is for me. This is for me. And he would not let it go. And a lot of people in the class cried because it was just so profound, because I had been talking about the power of this particular formula and how tremendously important it is. The flow of energy that flushes and flows and travels through our body has a focal point, and the focal point of the energetic flow of energy through the blood, the shui, the qi carried by the shui, is heart center point. Well, heart center point is a very interesting point because it reflects into the physical anatomy of the heart, and it's referred to as the bundle of His. And the bundle of His is literally the controller of our spiritual energy and the way our heart beats. Every aspect of our spirit, our soul, our emotions is manifested in this very extraordinary regulator of the way the heart beats. And this is key, this key formula to support the heart and any condition which affects our soul through lost love, particularly lost love, which affects our heart, is extraordinarily important. And as you can see, Superfit 1 peak performance, our oat formula, correlates and is often used together with flower formula 1, lotus formula, which is our most powerful flower formula for spiritual shock and tragedy and trauma and shocking news and accident and all the things that are so profoundly complex that hurt us so much, scar and wound us right the way throughout our lives. Flower formula 2, recovery, the journey of our life, the exquisitely beautiful emotional star, white rose. Flower formula 10 is called Nicotiana, and it's for the breath of life, breathing. And flower formula 11 is hawthorn for heartache. Then we come to our special care formulas. The special care program has been specifically created to support our little autistic children, our children who have been damaged. And the special care treatment is a program to bring, it's a year's program to bring back our little children and to help them form and have a more comfortable and happier life. And then our very powerful Heart Power Formula 1 and Heart Power Formula 4. Now, intriguingly enough, you might think that I'm saying that these formulas would take the place of Superfit 1 peak performance, but not at all, because each of these formulas has something to offer. And we are talking about the chakra formulas, and this exquisitely beautiful formula, not only is it called our rainbow formula, but it's also called our gold formula. Sometimes I ask children what color they love, and they say to me, they love gold. And when I point to this formula, they say, yes, that's gold. As far as I'm concerned, they say, yes, that's the gold one. That's the one I want, which is very, very special. And again, we are faced with some pretty terrible damage to people nowadays. And so what is so lovely and so extraordinary is that we have this ability to offer this level of help through our beautiful, beautiful tree formula. Totally specific and totally on its own. You can dose it, spiritual, really intense, powerful, powerful, one daily, for mental chronicity, twice daily, for emotional, functional, 3 times daily, and finally for physical, 4 times, 5 times, or even 6 times daily when it's needed on a physical, acute, now concept. Again, you can even treat you can treat with 2 tree formulas. You can combine as many of the flower formulas with the tree formula, but you can only treat 1 flower formula on each level. At one stage, I realized that people were becoming so ill that I started to look at this concept of maybe giving people 2 tree formulas, but never on the same level. Always, if one was needed emotionally, functionally, 3 times a day, then I would never give another tree formula at the same time, always at a slightly different time, usually 5 minutes in between. Too powerful to give 2 messages at the same time. You have to respect the fact that these formulas are message formulas. They're telling your patient, your brain, they're telling the person, what to do, how to rebalance themselves, how to bring about a healing process. So extremely beautiful gold peak performance are one of our very, very powerful formulas. So from there, we are going to go on to our next one, if we can. Oops, no, too many. So this is our Superfit 2 Calm. Vibrating on the same frequency as our flower formula 3, which is our ultraviolet formula, and the vibration of Superfit 2 Calm, 380 nanometers, incredibly important energy. This formula is made from the eucalyptus tree, Australia, an extraordinarily beautiful tree. And the very stunning thing about the eucalyptus is it lives in some of the hottest parts and the hottest deserts in the world. Funnily enough, the fruit of the eucalyptus the seed pod of the eucalyptus tree um, is stimulated into growth through fire. What is so extraordinary about the eucalyptus is that it has most interesting healing powers, the eucalyptus. But we use this formula to support massively complex irritation, inflammation for modern society, when people are massively inflamed, damaged by pharmaceutical chemicals, aspartame, all the chemicals in modern society which have conspired to create such complex hyperactivity, ADHD, inflammatory, irritation. And there are many, many chemicals that actually do this, but we've talked a little bit about aspartame as being probably one of the most lethal chemicals on this planet. And it seriously is dangerous. It does cause terrible damage to the brain, the cerebral cortex, the pituitary gland, the spinal cord, the pons varoli, right at the top of the spinal cord. Very, very, very important formula, calm formula. We use it to support little children when they are seriously hyperactive. That is a very, very important aspect of this formula. We use it to support the central nervous system, the pericardium meridian, for peace and relaxation and for calm, as its very name suggests, tranquility and stillness and untroubled thoughts. People are troubled in modern society, and this exquisitely powerful tree formula has a very, very profound, helpful benefit. Interestingly enough, when babies are born to mothers with epidural, there are about 5 pages in the epidural manual of information, medical information manual, referred to as MIMS, which lists the side effects of epidural. One of the epidural side effects is that it crosses the placental barrier and it infects and it disturbs the baby, causing an excitation of the central nervous system. That's the expression used in the medical manual. And yet, how many people are ever told that epidural causes this inflammatory response in the baby's brain? Very, very few. Although it's the listed side effect right at the top of the list of side effects, most doctors have no clue. Interestingly enough, epidural is very destructive for many, many, many reasons. If it is life-saving, then of course it's relevant. But if it's just offered of, come on, love, it's now time for your epidural, again, this your epidural and offering this dangerous procedure, which has got many, 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 many side effects, it is actually not as safe as people are led to believe. Interestingly enough, I have met many, many women whose lives have been ruined by this procedure. And you hear so often the carelessness of it. Oh, it didn't work, so I had another one. Or I was put on an epidural drip. Or they had to updose it because, they put it in the wrong place. Well, it didn't work. That raises a flag straight away. It did not work. If you inject a large vial of anesthetic into somebody's spinal cord through the meninges into the epidural space, and it doesn't work, you've got to say, well, where is it? Where has it gone? If it isn't working, why is it not working? It must be somewhere. Now, we know that babies born to mothers whose first epidural did not work, and then they have another one, often end up being very, there's usually an emergency cesarean, to be honest, because everything gets paralyzed, mother goes into a state of complete paralysis, and baby is in very great distress because this drug causes a massive surge of disturbance. Is a chemical that infects and disturbs the pons varoli. I honestly believe that one of the main causes of hyperactivity in children, or ADHD, or all these names, there's hundreds of names now to describe all these different the same condition that has got many multiple names, multiple labels. I think one of the basic culprits, if you like, is this procedure called epidural, as also is the induction drug, oxytocin. Again, this formula vibrates on the frequency of healthy production of oxytocin. And intriguingly enough, oxytocin is really responsible. It's called the love hormone, and it's not just responsible for the emotions and the tranquility of the soul, but it is also responsible for calming the sodium pathway, one of the largest electrolyte pathways in the body. And it's for this reason, I think, that so many people in modern society are obese, and children are being, they're very overweight, they're obese. Mothers also suffer with terrible complications and backache, because where you put the epidural also creates a paralysis, usually somewhere between lumbar 1 and lumbar 2, which is a procedure that is actually hideously dangerous and can impair a woman's physical life for very, very many years, if not forever, until it's dealt with. What we've actually found with this formula is it's a glorious antidote to these pharmaceutical chemicals and e-additives and petrochemicals. Petrochemicals, plastics, remember that most children's toys now are made of some form of plastic. Plastic bags, plastic wrap on our food, plastic packaging, plastic this, plastic that. Plastic and the petrochemical industry are very responsible for poisoning our world. And this is one of the most important formulas to literally stabilize the spinal cord and allow a release of these toxins that have paralyzed the central nervous system and caused real spiritual distress. One of the interesting listed side effects of epidural is epilepsy. Many, many children have epileptic fits. And I've got an interesting story to tell. You'll also see flower formula 13 is listed in brackets. We frequently use Superfit Calm with flower formula 13 to support urinary tract, stress-related calming, stress and anxiety, eczema, all these conditions which occur under the influence of stress. And I had a little baby, a boy, who was brought to me in London by very sweet parents. And this little boy just sat on the floor, gnawing away at his hand until it bled, making funny little noises. When he couldn't walk, but he'd sort of shuffle around on his bottom in little circles, kept on having little dizzy spells and very serious epilepsy. I put him on to this formula, Superfit 2 Calm, and Apple Calm, which is one of our special care formulas, very important, beautiful Apple Calm, to support the eliminate and help elimination of these chemicals at birth, and to help little children with serious autistic tendencies and special needs. And this little boy had been so seriously ill with his fits. He'd been having grand mal regularly, and medication that the doctors had put him on had caused him to become cyanotic. So they were terrified. They didn't know what to do. He died, and then they'd shaken him and brought him back to life. And they had to take him off the medication because it was just simply too harmful. And they came to see me, and I put him on to this combination of Superfit 2 and Apple Calm. And the following day, apparently he had 20 putty-mal, gentle little fits. The following day after that, he had about 10. The following day after that, he had none, and then no more fits. No more fits. And then just before, on Christmas Eve, she rang me in floods of tears, petrified, upset, terrified, and said, my little girl has found the bottle and has drunk all the pills, eaten all the pills, and I'm desperate. What am I going to do? Well, they were in England. I was in Jersey. There was no shops open. There was no post. I didn't know what to say. I just simply said, are there any pills left at all? And she said, yes, there's about 2 little pills at the bottom of the bottle. And I said, go and get some water, fill up the bottle with water, and then every time give it a jolly good shake, 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 and bang it and smack it and tap it, and really try to activate it, and that should help. Well, it wasn't that good. It didn't help that much. What happened then was that the child started having petit mal again. That was after 2 months of no fits at all. And then, of course, we sent them a package of about 6 remedies. I said, hide them around the house so this doesn't happen again. And shortly after that, this little boy stopped gnawing his hands, stopped fitting. And then the greatest and the most wonderful, wonderful experience of my life was when he walked into the clinic and said, "Dai Nana." And it just literally broke my heart. And I realized, you know, just, wow, this is what it's all about, helping these incredible little children, working with our little children. But of course, this formula is not just for little children, it's for all of us. Whenever there is a toxic thought, remember that thoughts can be toxic as well. Aggression and destruction, disturbance, loss of assets, terrified and worried, loss of home, stressful, not sleeping, anxious, broken. And people are very broken in modern society, struggling to pay their bills, struggling to keep their children fed. All of these things, they matter so very much. And we find that this formula has become incredibly important recently, never more so than as a support for the current circumstances. So we love this formula. It is probably one of the most popular of all the tree formulas, most needed, let's put it that way, although it's certainly by no means the most important. So a really, really beautiful, beautiful formula from the eucalyptus, the Australian tree. We call this the Australian tree, relating also to Heart Power 2, which is called Spiritual Calm. So we have Special Care Apple Calm, Superfit 2 Calm, Heart Power 2 Spiritual Calm, and Flower Formula 3, which is also called Calm as well, Pink Camellia. A very calming and important formula. So let us look at our stunningly beautiful Chinese tree, the beautiful, beautiful magnolia. Superfit 3 Relax, 423 nanometers, is violet. Absolutely wow. I mean, you know, the magnolia is just such a beautiful, beautiful tree, and grandiflora. Now, it's an interesting story about the seed pod of the magnolia tree. This extraordinary seed pod looks exactly like the spinal cord and the pons viroli. And I've always looked at it and thought, it's like a signature. And then I read this phenomenally interesting article about the extracts of the the extracts of the magnolia seed pod being a very, very important healing for brain damage for the spinal cord, people paralyzed, people with spinal cord imbalances, and supporting the pons viroli. And I thought, we already know that. And this is exactly why this is such a valuable formula. Remember that all the information about 423 nanometers is actually with our Flower Formula 4, our thistle formula, which is our beautiful, beautiful violet thistle formula, predominantly for the relationship with our fathers. This exquisite strength of the powerful, you know, noble daddy who provides for the family and is the loving protector. And it's just a very, very powerful, you know, the male energy of the world, the yang energy, incredibly important to love and respect our male children, our boy children, who grew up into fine, decent young men, and then have families of their own and become fathers in their own right. And it's terribly, terribly important energy. The circadian rhythm is intriguing because the circadian rhythm is our ability to live comfortably within our lives, sleeping and waking, and again, the rhythm of day and night. And again, there is a very important hormone that is produced in the daylight, which is serotonin, and is absolutely one of the key brain hormones. Now, serotonin is interesting because it's like the hubcap of the brain hormone pathway. And it's like a Catherine wheel. It spins out and it activates histamine, it activates enkephalin, activates stimulant interferon, endorphin, the whole sort of scenario, angiotensin. But above all, it activates this very, very interesting hormone called brain substance P factor. And brain substance P factor is absolutely fascinating because it is the factor that actually brings us out of stress. Many times people are not sleeping well because they're stressed, they're worried, they're anxious, they're in an heightened adrenal system where they can't relax. And so the problem is that they go to sleep and then they wake up and then they can't go back to sleep again. Well, I love this formula more than you can possibly know. I have it beside my bed, and whenever I'm thinking about all the things I've got to do tomorrow, and I can't sleep, or I wake up in the middle of the night, and I think, oh dear, the alarm clock's going to go in 3 hours. If you take one of these formulas, it helps you to sleep peacefully and wake up comfortably, and it does not make you feel drowsy. It is not like a sleeping pill. And again, it's also really, really helpful because many, many, many young people today, move over. She's in anyway, we've got a visitor here. The truth is that the circadian rhythm and peaceful sleep and serotonin is incredibly important for our health. People who don't sleep, who can't sleep, who have a terrible time trying to sleep often end up very, very ill indeed, because it opens up the doorway to some quite serious brain trauma, quite serious Alzheimer's, and again, the whole cascade of the tree formula linked with our beautiful, extraordinarily powerful heart power formula, heart power 2. So this is a really, really interesting formula in terms of calming and soothing and helping people to cope with their environment. And yet again, many, many people who have these complications are taking these antidepressants, many of which are addictive. Very, very difficult to get rid of these things. And intriguingly enough, one of the things that we really, really need is support that does something in a gentle way without hurting, but at the same time helps to re-educate the brain to be stable. So one of the biggest problems with these antidepressants, that there's so many of them, and there's so many different trade names for the same drug, they are addictive. So to be able to get rid of that addiction by helping people to relax to such a degree that they no longer need their drugs, this is key, this is valuable. Now we've got this beautiful blue formula. It's called Immune Tea, and it's the redwood, this beautiful tree. I mean, oh my God, it's the tallest tree in the world. And recently there was this article about the tallest redwood tree in the world, which was very, very old and extremely tall. They are stunning. And this is the tree from Canada, the incredible North American redwood. Beautiful, beautiful tree. And it has a very interesting bark, which almost looks indigo. I love this formula very much indeed. It's exceptionally valuable. Immune Tea, Superfit 4, Immune Tea, which is a little bit of a play on words, and I think you probably understand exactly what it means. It is blue, and we have 5 blue formulas. So we frequently use Superfit 4 Immune Tea alongside one of those 5 indigo and 1 blue formula. So for example, if we need this formula to support the mouth And the turmoil that we talk about with Flower Formula 5, this incredibly difficult situation when people become hot and angry and bothered and confused, and little children, particularly teething babies, that happy one minute and screaming their little heads off the next. A very, very wonderful formula. And again, if you use Flower Formula 5 together with Superfit 4, it creates this amazing, amazing, heightened support for the energetic imbalance. We were talking about children who have lost their confidence, who've been bullied, hurt, inappropriately abused, not believed in or hurt or teased in the playground, bullied. Flower Formula 6 for Celia. It's really, really interesting how important that formula number 6 is. But to make it even more powerful, we can combine it with our Superfit 4 immune tea. Likewise, our Flower Formula 7 orchid formula for the support of the auditory pathway, the balance, the missions to be fulfilled. The opposite of frustration is fulfillment. And again, this exquisitely powerful orchid formula, which has a signature. It looks like an insect. And we know that the historical healing power of the orchids for malaria, dengue fever, yellow fever, and these tropical disorders. So it's hardly surprising that our beautiful orchid formula has such an impact to support tropical disorders, as well as limes and midges and mosquito bites and whatever insect-related parasitic disorders. Flower Formula 7, incredibly powerful. But it has another factor to it, which is really important, and that is that Flower Formula 7 supports the macrophage system. Now, the macrophage system is the internal immune system, and we have the lungs, the alveolar macrophage system, we have the spleen, the reticular endothelial system, the thymus gland, of course, the reticular endothelial system of the thymus are totally our immune system. And again, we know that histamine, which is supported by this formula, is to support against anaphylactic reactions and anaphylactic shock when coming into contact with something toxic. And again, even sometimes there is toxic shock from tampons, for example. So that this is a really, really amazingly important formula for anaphylaxis, together with Flower Formula 7. We looked at Flower Formula 8, Uplift, Rosemary formula as being a formula of great requirement to uplift people when they're very depressed. And again, there was a quality that formula had as an antidote quality, which was the ability to eliminate anesthetic and hydrochloride drugs. And so combined with Superfit 4, even more powerful. And then, of course, our one beautiful light blue formula, Flower Formula 9, Bluebell, which talks about having faith and trusting, knowing that there'll always be help when you pray, when you ask for help, it will always come. And then the rather portentous little statement, consider the possibility that we learn from experiences, the negative experiences that we learn from them, they teach us how to move forward, how to learn. And this, I suppose, to a certain extent, mimics this concept that we produce antibodies against viruses and bacteria in order to maintain our ability to survive. Our survival depends on this. So to create an antibody, we have to come into contact sometimes with the negative force of the virus or the bacteria in order to create our healing powers. And again, we talked a little bit about Flower Formula 7, the name of Flower Formula 7 being cool, calm, which is the fever. And so we never take somebody dramatically out of a fever, but we enable them to go through that healing process far more quickly. So this is why this Superfit formula is probably extraordinarily important. It takes a very, very interesting place to support emotions. And remember that in Chinese medicine, we always talk about his emotions being, or viruses being emotional opportunists. So, you know, they hit us when we're vulnerable, when we're emotional. This is our blue formula. It's a very emotional formula. Our previous formulas, the three formulas, 1, 2, and 3, are the formulas for the spiritual pathway, but this is our emotional pathway. So when we say that it linked with thymus, teeth, immune system, autonomic nervous system, probiotic, the sinuses, the mastoids, the cranial nerves, the tonsils, please remember that that's just the physical link with a powerful, aggressive, toxic shock of emotions. You see, emotions can be just as toxic as physical poisons. So cruelty, aggression, hurt, grief, sorrow, all these emotions that are so negative can be so toxic. This is the Indian tree. The Indian tree is the beautiful, beautiful tree of God, the Deodar cedrus. This utterly stunning tree is written about in Sanskrit texts, which are the most ancient healing texts in the world. And the tree of God is considered to be probably, they call it the tree of God because it's God's gift to humanity. And it is utterly, utterly beautiful. The story was that I was, oh dear, sorry, cat sitting on my fingers. So I can't get rid of that. So yes, I was lecturing in Lyon at the Shivananda Yoga Center, and we were talking about healing with plants. And there was this wonderful shamanic Sanskrit healer who is a very wise professor of Sanskrit law. And when I started to talk to him and talk to everybody about this Deodar cedrus, and I said, you've got one here. And all you have to do every morning is to go out and pick, you know, catch the dewdrops with your cup and drink water, and you will be given God's gift of healing. And he came over to me and kissed my feet, which was incredibly embarrassing, I suppose, in a way. But he just said, you know, this, you have given us a gift of beyond price, the understanding of the power of this tree of God. And he said, you know, this is our tree, and you've given us this gift to explain that we can drink the dewdrops from it, and it will bring us enlightenment. But my goodness me, the fir cone of this tree, oh, does it smell heavenly. When you breathe and smell this spruce, this, you know, the cedrus, the tree of God, Deodar cedrus, when you smell the fir cone, it just rocks you and socks you, you know, it's just incredible. And again, it's called Breathe. A very, very interesting tree from that point of view. And I really love it. And again, we use this tree to support all the energy and all the information that we read about and learned about with Flower Formula 10, the breath of life. Again, the rejection, the loss of love, being hurt, being brutalized, being abandoned. It's so interesting that when, for example, I'm working with people and they need the breath of life, breathe easy, or the heart path 3, breathe easy. And I say to them, you know, this is for people, probably not you, but this is for people who've been abandoned or hurt or rejected in childhood. And people, they just look at me and say, how did you know? Of course, that is so true. I was abandoned as a child. I was rejected. I went through that hell. And it's so, so interesting that the awful truth is the inability to forgive rejection and cruelty, leaving people absolutely paralyzed when they cannot forgive. I have a story to tell, and it's about a very beautiful woman who was brought to me by her husband. And he said, look, can you help my wife? You helped our neighbor who was dying of cancer, and she made the most incredible recovery. Can you help my wife? And I said, well, bring her to me, bring her, and I will see what I can do to help. And she needed this formula, and she needed flower formula 10. And I said to her, I was intrigued. I said, have you got children? Have you got a son? And she was so angry. She looked at me and she said, no, God stole my son. God took my son away, killed my son when he was 21 years old. And I will never forgive God for stealing my child. And she said, my cancer, which was in her right ovary, her son ovary, her right-sided ovary, pulmonary ovary. She said, I will die because there is no forgiveness in my heart. And it sent a shiver through me because I was so sad for her. And her husband begged her to forgive. And please, darling, can't you forgive? And it was a heartbreaking experience. Actually, sadly, she did die. And the family rang me. He rang me and he said, I want to thank you so much because the last words of my beautiful wife was, I forgive. And I think, wow, that this brings home to you the emotion, the power of how powerful emotions are. And yet again, it makes us humble because we realize that, we're not wielding some great magical wand when we help people. We are only giving them the gift of our own energy. And this goes for every practitioner I've ever met who loves their work so much. All we ever want to do is to be there to help our patients. But when that sort of thing happens, it takes you away because it takes your breath away, if you like, talking about breath of life and breathe, because it makes you realize just how extraordinarily powerful the energy of the plants and the flowers are, and how these formulas are almost God-given. And this one particularly, being our Tree of God, has to be one of our most beautiful, most powerful formulas. Intriguingly enough, we only have one green formula for the lungs, but we do have a heart formula, which is Heart Power 1, Superfit 1, the oak formula, which is for the cardiovascular, which I believe is really the center of everything. So then we come to So Below. And yet again, we've got this complicated situation with one yellow tree formula and 4 yellow flower formulas. So yet again, we can take the energy of the flower formulas beyond into the tree energy. So if, for example, you have somebody with hepatotoxicity, you have maybe somebody who's on chemotherapy, which has a terrible effect on the liver, but you want to help them go through this with maximum comfort, you can use Superfit 6 together with flower formula 12 to support the liver, the gallbladder, and the stomach meridian. If you have somebody with a very serious kidney complication, or they're about to have a kidney surgery, a very, very complex and difficulty with their kidneys, then you can use flower formula 13 together with our beautiful tree formula. It's a yew tree. Now, here we have another fascinating aspect. This yew tree is the oldest tree in England, and it's 3,760 years old, which is astonishing. And it's still producing these berries. It's still producing fruit. And it's that old. And I mean, my goodness gracious me, to have a tree that is 3,000 years old just takes your breath away. It's unbelievable. to think this dinosaur, if you like, this massive dinosaur of a tree is just so interesting. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the tamoxifen drug for cancer is made from yew clippings, which is interesting. And this is so intriguing because, again, this incredibly powerful tree offers healing on so many levels. And again, the yew is an interesting tree as well, because it's very much the tree that was used to make bows and arrows, war tree. So, and cricket bats, I believe. Or is that willow? Well, perhaps I'm making a mistake there. Anyway, we have again our flower formula 14, the daffodil formula, which is against fear. People who are very, very frightened. And again, a lot of people are very frightened at the moment. So when you have somebody who is incredibly scared and frightened and not able to fulfill their lives, their dreams, have no hope, and manifests as terrible irritable bowel and skin problems and gluten intolerance and allergies and complications with their digestive tract, then the small intestine meridian, which is the correlative meridian of the heart, often very emotional, then you would use digest with flower formula 14. And then finally, we talked yesterday about flower formula 15, yellow foxglove, this incredible pancreas formula. And we talked about the relationship of the pancreas with our children and our unborn children and our longing for a child, as well as loss, sickness, or void of child, or tragedy with our children. We were not born to lose our children. Our children are born to lose their parents, but to lose a child is one of the most harrowing and most devastating and destructive situations. And a story about this formula, together with flower formula 15, I had a young girl who came to see me, and she needed these two formulas. And so I said, would you like to try one? And she said, yes, very much so. And so I popped a 15 flower formula into her mouth, and I was just about to pop the Superfit 6 into her mouth as well. And she let out this almost like a primordial howl and said to me, I killed my baby. I killed my baby. And it was so harrowing. It was just so awful to hear her agony. And then she started to cry. So I gave her the 12, the Superfit 6 as well. And I said, tell me. And she said, I had a wonderful boyfriend who I absolutely adored. I fell pregnant. He walked out on me. He refused to have anything more to do. He wouldn't talk to me. My parents, I could never tell. I went to the hospital to have an abortion, and I was treated abominably. I came out of the hospital and I was abused on the steps of the hospital because it was an abortion clinic. And she said, I've had to cope with that. Never told a soul. I don't know where that came from. I don't know why I started to howl like that. She said, I feel really uncomfortable. And I said, no, you don't feel uncomfortable. It's grief. You are letting go of grief. And she said, you know, I've been so ill. I've had terrible, terrible digestive problems, cramps in my tummy. I've not been able to eat anything and just feel so sick. And, you know, I can't find anything wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with me. I've had all the tests. There's nothing wrong with me. So I said, no, you've just been in terrible, deep grief, terrible, deep sadness. But this formula will ease some of that pain, and it will help you to cope. And she said, I need something to help me forgive myself. So I said, you can have this beautiful flower formula 10, flower formula 10, breath of life, to help you with that. Anyway, about a month later, I bumped into her in town, and she looked absolutely gorgeous. And she just came up and gave me a hug and said, I've never felt so wonderful. I've recovered. I feel safe. Thank you. And it was the flowers that did it. It was incredible little flowers that, the flowers and the little seeds and the healing from these incredible plants, extraordinary plants. So there you have this concept that we only have one yellow tree formula, but it empowers the other yellow formulas. But by no means are they the only formulas that you can combine digest with. That is just to give you a guide that this formula could and should be used to enhance those yellow formulas to give you more information, but you can use digest for alongside any program that your patient requires. Now we come into our fabulous two formulas. We have two. You see, we don't really have 10 tree formulas. We have 9. And the face of the 9th guide is twofold. When they stand and look at you, this guide has a male face, and then he turns around and he has a female face. So we have 2 orange formulas, but both for the same powerful reason. Male Patil, Superfit 7, very, very, very important. Now, this tree is from Norway, the beautiful Christmas tree. And again, the fir cones of the Christmas tree, very, very powerful indeed. Male Patil, it is also made with a combination of willow, the beautiful willow tree, and it responds and relates to our flower formula 16 and 17, our orange formulas. Generally speaking, we do not give women the male Patil because it was specifically created to support the health of the sperm. But there are times when women call for this formula. It may be that they're pregnant and with a male child, in which case, if that's the case, I will give them this formula. But genuinely and generally, if a woman tests positively for this formula, I would give them the female formula, which is the Superfit Female Repro. But I would actually suggest that they take it with the flower formula 17 together with 17, because 17 is the yang flower formula for the right side of the body. Likewise, if a male tests positive for the female formula, I tend to give them the male formula, but I give it to them together with flower formula 16, which is for the yin side of the body. So I keep them to a certain extent separate, but there are times when I don't. And that could be because somebody is transitioning, or because they feel in their souls that they're in the wrong body, in which case they may very well need the male formula for a female or vice versa. So that is something that can be related to the individual who is there that you're trying to help them. Male Patil is also very much interestingly linked with Heart Path 3, Breathe Freely, being a right-sided formula, a yang formula, but it also can be used together with Heart Path 5 for men, Willow Nurture, which is the special care formula for the hormones, the hypothalamus hormones and the pituitary hormones that are responsible for maintaining the gonadotrophin, testicle, and female reproductive organs as well. So fascinating formula for the prostate as well. And prostate cancer is very, very, very much on the increase. Tend with prostate to work with flower formula 16, because this works on prostate hormone and keeps the levels of PSA test safe. We've had amazing results with this formula in that level. So again, it can be combined with any of the formulas, but particularly interesting is our wonderful use of these trees to create a balance for the fertility. And we have our own fetal biophysics fertility program with these two formulas. But I want to tell you a story about this formula. This is a particularly interesting formula because we call it arbol de tulle, but it also has the cannonball tree in it. Female repro, arbol de tulle. It's a most exquisitely beautiful and extraordinary tree. And there is a story to this tree, and it's called the Trinidad tree. I told you that these trees that we've made these formulas often have extraordinary stories behind them, but this is probably one of the most extraordinary. That I was lecturing in Sri Lanka many years ago, and there was a rather lovely young doctor called Dr. Khan on the training course, and he came up to me and he said, I've been speaking to my father and I'd like to invite you to come and stay with us. And I said, oh, how lovely. Where do you live? Which part of India are you in? He said, no, don't live in India. I live in Trinidad. So I laughed and I said, well, that sounds wonderful. Thank you so much. But I don't think I'll ever be able to come to Trinidad. It's unlikely that I'll ever come to Trinidad, but thank you for the invitation. And I'll take your email address and we'll keep in touch. As is often the way, after these interesting invitations, I got home to Jersey about 3 weeks later and had an invitation to go to Mystique by my son's boss, who was a yachtmaster there. And whilst there, we had a rather odd and rather unpleasant experience. It's a really strange place, Mystique, full of very high-powered actors and actresses and high-powered people. Anyway, we weren't that welcome, unfortunately, because we weren't famous. But on one occasion, Anthony and I were swimming on the beach, and we were told, you're not welcome here, please go away, this is our beach. Although that wasn't strictly true, but we were told to go. You're not welcome, please go away. So we were a bit hurt by that, but unfortunately our host had gone sailing, so he wasn't there to sort of, to look after us and say, no, you are entitled to swim on that beach. But anyway, it was very hot, and we were in a little cottage that had no swimming pool. And I said to Anthony, I don't think they're welcome here in Mystique. Why don't we go to Trinidad? So we booked a little flight and flew over to Trinidad in this little four-plane seated plane, flying over this beautiful, beautiful country. Well, we first of all contacted our Dr. Khan, and he said, oh, yes, he said, we knew you were coming. We've been waiting for you. How exciting. Please, please come. And we arrived, and they made us so welcome. But they took us to their house, and it was his father, Dr. Khan's father, who opened his arms, and his wife, and said, well, you're welcome. We've been waiting for you. We knew you were going to come. You've been invited. We didn't really know what they meant by that, but we were very excited to be with them because they were absolutely charming. And they said, we want to take you into the forests tomorrow. These are primary jungle forests. They've never been touched. They've not been invaded because they lived right up in the mountains of Trinidad. So the following morning, we went with our little bottles and our bags to make, flower collecting and plant collecting. And whilst I was in the forest, I got separated. And I suddenly realized that I was being surrounded by these little energy spirits that were pulling at me. Well, I'm quite a straightforward sort of person, but I found this very strange. And I was pulled and pulled and pulled, like a little fingers pulling my skirt, until eventually I was led to this tree. And there was this extraordinary tree that had the flowers growing out straight out of the bark of the tree. Absolutely beautiful, big, slushy orange flowers. I was quite taken aback by this, and I thought, what on earth? How utterly beautiful. And just then, the little entities that had led me to this tree disappeared. So I was excited. I gathered up this flower, this beautiful, beautiful, slushy orange flower, and went to look for the others. And when I found them, I found Anthony looking very startled. And he said, there's something very strange going on here. There's something very odd in this one. We're not alone. And I said, I think I know what you mean. I don't think we are. And he said, I've been shown this extraordinary tree, which has got these little orange berries on it. And I think it's for the male energy. And I said, I think you might be right. So we harvested these little berries, and then we went back to the house, made the remedies. And of course, it was full moon that night. So it was all very lovely. And we were very excited because the remedies bubbled like you wouldn't believe. They sort of turned into champagne drinks, bubbling and bubbling away. And that evening, our host, who was quite smug, said, I want to show you something. And he brought out these paintings, and he said, we had this mystical artist who came to stay with us. And he brought out these paintings. There were two paintings, one with all these little sort of entities in the spirits, in the midst of the spirits in the trees. And she had painted the little spirits that had led me to the tree. And again, I was so taken aback because my goodness, I'm not the only one who's seen them. And he said, these are the spirits who called you here and brought you here for this particular tree. So we went all the way across the world from Sri Lanka to Trinidad to be given the gift of these trees. And there was another painting, and again, I didn't see them, but Anthony did, that there were little children in the woods as well. And she also showed us the painting of the little children that Anthony had seen. He said, I wasn't led by the spirits, I was led by the children. And that really was an extraordinarily profound experience, because I came back with those tree formulas, and then it was those tree formulas that formed the basis of our Superfit 7 and Superfit 8 trees. And then my lovely friend who was living in Mexico said, I have a fir cone of the oldest tree in the world. It's called Arbol de Tulle, the Tulle tree. And it's still producing fir cones, and I have a fir cone of this tree. So that also is in this particular formula, this Arbol de Tulle, the oldest. You can look it up on the website. It's exquisite. It's huge, absolutely huge. It's purported to be about 4,000 years old. So energy, this ancient energies, and this incredible tree that we were taken to, absolutely beautiful. But the story doesn't end there, because a lot later on, I was called to look after this wonderful young woman who had had a terrible experience, was very ill. And then she was desperate to have a child, a very wealthy family, and they needed an heir to the family. And I looked after her and helped her with these formulas, both of them, in fact. And she had a little son, and the family was so thrilled that they invited me to go and meet with them and to say thank you. And I was invited to this beautiful manor house. And as I drove up, there was this woman standing on the steps of the manor house. And it was the same woman who told me to go away on the beach, and that I wasn't welcome because I was a stranger and I wasn't welcome. And she had her arms out and she said, oh, welcome, welcome. Thank you. You've given us a gift beyond price. But the really astonishing thing is that she didn't recognize me, and I didn't say very much at all. I didn't say we'd met before. But it wasn't until I was leaving that she suddenly looked at me and she said, I think we've met before. So I smiled at her and I said, well, I don't think so. But the extraordinary gift that her lack of welcome gave us, we would never have gone to Trinidad if we had not been made unwelcome. So there's a very interesting word here called welcome. You are welcome. You are not welcome. You are welcome. It's very fascinating, the resonance of those words. But this exquisite gift that we were given has saved many, many people's lives and helped them to conceive. And we have many fetal biophysics babies born to our IVF program, if you like to call it. And this also brings me to another quality of these formulas, not just because they help people to fall pregnant and because they break the lock that holds them back, but also we do know that babies born with IVF procedures are often traumatized and damaged. And so what we do is we use these formulas as a negator of the toxicity that can, in fact, lead to an unhealthy or sick little baby by using these formulas to support the negativity of the IVF program. But there is one thing that needs to be understood. These formulas are so powerful that they often override the efficacy of the shutdown medication. One of the medications that's used in IVF is to shut down the ovaries, and they can't shut down the ovaries if the woman is taking this remedy. So we have to say, please don't take these remedies whilst you're undergoing that stage of your IVF, only afterwards when you're pregnant and we want to ensure that you're going to have a healthy baby. And that leads us on to say that we always advise women who are pregnant to take Flower Formula 2, Flower Formula 16, and Female Repro. And it's a phenomenal combination. So we love this formula very much. It's extremely valuable and very, very important. Now we come to our beautiful cherry formula structure. Superfit 9 structure, the wild cherry formula. Bones, skeletal structure, skeletal, pain, ow, now, endorphin. The structure formula vibrates on the frequency of infrared, red and infrared, and it's relative to Flower Formula 18, our poppy formula, beautiful, the lifeblood, the vitality, the bones, the legs, this incredible happy formula called poppy formula. And then we've got the red chrysanthemum, which is our large intestine meridian, Flower Formula 18, the pericardium meridian, the circulatory meridian for the blood, but Flower Formula 19 is for the colon, the large intestines, and this lovely red formula, the flower of life, the chrysanthemum, is very powerful to support people who are utterly blocked, stagnant, constipated, fearful, frightened, homeless, ill, sick, terrible Clostridium, hemorrhoids, hip structural imbalances with their hips, hip replacement operations possibly. And again, Flower Formula 20, our beautiful rising magnetic formula, Kundalini, the dark red formula. And intriguingly enough, these energies are interfered with by the tetanus bacteria and the Clostridium bacteria, food poisoning. And often the relative formula here is HPAR5. This formula stimulates a hormone called endorphin. Now, endorphin is a very, very interesting hormone because it's damaged by anesthetic. It's damaged by drugs such as heart drugs, high blood pressure pills, antacids, and the hydrochloride range, the sedative drugs. There's so many, the antidepressants, and they interfere with this hormone endorphin. So they do cause pain. They often lead, interesting, even painkillers. Eventually, they do so much damage to endorphin that they do cause terrible pain. And again, how ridiculous is that, to be taking a painkiller that actually induces pain, because once they wear off, the pain is so much more serious because they damage the capability of producing endorphin. Endorphin is a very interesting hormone. It's the hormone that helps us to deal with the physical, spiritual situation that occurs now. Have you ever known what it feels like to be so badly wounded that it's almost as if somebody picked up a knife and stabbed you with it? The pain of a terrible piece of news, the pain of the agony of the grief, say, for example, of somebody you love dying, or hearing bad news about somebody you love, or being frightened about someone you love. That pain, oh, that absolute agony of pain because of shocking news. And that pain is sedated by our ability to produce endorphin. If we didn't, we would die. We would die of the shock of it. Flower Formula 1 supports that pain. A Heart Power 1 supports that pain. And again, this formula can be used alongside that shocking pain of an agonizing shock, if you like, terrible trauma, or shocking news, heartbreaking news. So it is not a physical formula, it's a spiritual formula that deals with the owl of now. But it does help physically. I know myself, because I was walking miles to get somewhere. We were doing this amazing jungle trek, and my hip was exquisitely uncomfortable. After walking, I think it was something like 28 kilometers, I was struggling a little bit because I'm not really used to walking. I'm not really that energetic. And my lovely darling Moon, who was with me, suddenly said to me, "Oh, well, I've got the structure formula. Would you like one?" And within a few seconds, my pain had totally disappeared. And again, I was so astonished. Then I kept on saying, "Well, I can walk another 2 miles now, and then I need another one." And again, so this is how I managed to get that. So wow, I'm absolutely taken aback by that. The fact that it really did help on a physical level as well as on a spiritual level. I don't know what the trauma was that was leading to this. Now I want to come to this formula. And this is probably the story of this formula. Superfit 10 injury, 111 nanometers, ponderosa pine, and silver birch. All the flower formulas, all the heart power, all the special care, all the EDS. It's so profoundly glorious, this formula. And if you see the label, it's silver, but it's also infrared, and it's also the rainbow. This beautiful silver coat, Angel Gabriel, absolutely stunning energy. I went to this beautiful place called Santa Fe, and when I went there, I told my lovely friend that I went with, my witness, a dream that I'd had. And the dream was this exquisite concept of the rainbow through the waterfall. And the dream is about humanity struggling in the mire, in the mud, drowning, struggling, unable to breathe, unable to cope, covered in sores and lesions. Literally the sort of pit of, hostile hell, if you like. But there was a way, an escape, and the escape was utterly astonishing, because it was up through this waterfall, climbing up through the waterfall with these incredible shafts of rainbow light, healing each stage of the journey, climbing, healing, until reaching the top of the waterfall, to be met by this shamanic healer with a black cat. I have my black cat sitting beside me here, as you can see in my screen. And this amazing concept of metamorphosism, changing from, this tragedy, this awful human suffering, to being glorious, spiritually released. And as each person reached the top of the waterfall, cleansed and healed and beautiful, they were turned into butterflies, and then flew and flitted up and turned into these incredible birds, and then circled up and flew away. And again, what a stunning, one beautiful dream. And 3 times I've been led to waterfalls, and the first time was in Santa Fe. And when we arrived, it was pouring with rain, and all the adobe mud was everywhere. Everybody was sloshing around in this brown adobe mud. And I said, oh, golly, it's just like my dream. And we met this wonderful man who was just so interesting. He was working with the Indians, the Cherokee Indian tribe, helping them. And he was teaching the children to run so that they had pride and dignity. They were all so broken. They were mostly alcoholics and they lived on jello. They were all diabetic. And they lost their tribal, beauty. They lost their customs. They'd been so displaced. And his life was dedicated to try and give them back their pride and their dignity and help them to reestablish their tribal heritage. And we met them and we went to this wonderful, wonderful ceremony. And there was this very handsome young man who was the grandson of the tribal chieftain and the medicine man. And I told him, oh, this is such a beautiful place. And he said, oh, I want to take you somewhere. There's somewhere I'd love to take you. It's up in the mountains. There's a beautiful waterfall, but I want to take you to these trees, these amazing trees, these healing trees. So we were excited about that, especially when he mentioned the waterfall. And so off we went, and we found these incredible, he took us to these beautiful trees, a forest of these ponderosa pine. And the fir cone of the ponderosa pine is enormous. It's an enormous fir cone, but the bark is incredibly beautiful. It's made up of millions of little puzzle pieces. And in the bark, I saw all these little butterflies, and I said, oh, goodness me, how extraordinary. That reminds me so much of my dream. But it's also very interesting because why is the bark of this tree so unusual? What are all these little puzzle pieces? And he said, this tree has been used by ancient mystics and our ancient tribal law for healing wounds and injuries and tribal warfare for healing the wounds. And we use the bark to heal all our wounds. He said it's very, very powerful. So I was excited by that. And again, these beautiful fir cones, so huge. And we collected the fir cones, we collected the bark from this tree, and then we walked up the mountain, and there was this waterfall. And the most incredible sunlight shafting through the waterfall with the rainbows. And I said, we've been brought here. This is part of the dream. This is our dream about the waterfall. I know this has healing powers. But the story doesn't end there, because I came back, of course, and made this amazing ponderosa pine formula. But then I had another extraordinary experience. And the experience was that I had a practitioner with me, one of my trainers, and we went for a lovely little outing, a dinner. It was a beautiful, beautiful evening. The sky was so clear that the stars, I've never seen stars like that in Jersey. They were incredible. I've only seen stars like that in the desert, not in Jersey, but on this particular occasion, the moon was the crescent moon, the sickle moon. It had a star right in the center of it. And it absolutely was so startlingly beautiful evening. And as we drove up to the restaurant, we drove through this avenue of silver birch trees. And I was just so taken aback because the lights from the car, the headlights shining on these birch trees and this sort of silver bark. And I went, oh my goodness me, we have to make a remedy. So on the way back from the restaurant, we peeled off some of the bark and put it into the water in the garden under the stars. And in the night, I had this vision, and the vision was extraordinary because I saw this amazing scroll on silver scroll with the words 111-110. And the words underneath were Eman Octavius. And I thought, Very strange. I don't know what that means. And then I woke up and I realized that I was actually awake. So I thought, I'll go and have a look at my remedy. And in the moonlight, it had literally turned into this parchment. And if you opened the parchment, on one side was the black writing, and on the inside was the red writing, the Sanskrit writing. And it was bubbling like a champagne. And I thought, I've never made a remedy in starlight before, but that was starlight. Absolutely stunning silver energy. Anyway, when Wendy got up, I asked her whether she understood this word, Iman Octavius, and she said, no, I don't know. And I said, but there's more to the dream, because it was the silver thread of procreation. And she said, oh, yes, yes, you have a flower essence in your 100 hedgerows called Storksbill, the silver thread of procreation. And it is antidoted ambergris. It's ambergris, that's very odd. That's the whale oil. And she said, well, it could be gold and silver. I went, ambergris, yes, you're right, it would be gold and silver. Anyway, the interesting thing is that I went to London to see my patients in London, and my first patient was an Iranian girl who was Khalil Gibran's niece. She was Iranian and very, very beautiful. She was wearing a silver coat. And we got on terribly well. Her name was Cesar Eccles. I've never forgotten her. She was so lovely. And I said, oh, you're Iranian. Do you know what Iman Octavius means? And she said, oh, yes, yes. She said, Iman means faith. I went, oh, wow, yes, how interesting. And what about Octavius? And she said, well, Octavius is the figure of 8. It's continuity, it's infinity. And if you see, it's the continuity of the figure of 8, but if you turn it up to heaven, it opens up to heaven as the 9th gate to God. And that is the infinity of spirituality. I said, well, that's actually really rather lovely explanation. Thank you so much, because I'd written the book called The 9 Gates of Healing. My next patient was a really beautiful man called Michael, who was blind. He was blind, and he was a healer. And we got on incredibly well. And I asked him about how he healed and did he know color? And he said, oh, no, he said, I don't know color. I work with silver energy. So he said, oh, how interesting. And what is the vibration of silver? And he said, it's infinity, 111. I went, and he said, that's Archangel Michael works with the infinity, the energy of 111. So I thought that was rather interesting. Anyway, my driver was a lovely chap from Pakistan, and he used to take me back and forth to the clinic. And I said, I've had this incredible dream. I must tell you about it. And do you understand what it means? And he said, oh, yes. He said, I do, very much so. He said, the symbol of infinity and faith, which is God love, absolutely what we call God love in the Muslim religion. It is our relationship with God on a spiritual level, which cannot be greater. And he said the symbol of faith is the sickle moon with a star in the center, silver energy. And so I was totally taken aback by this fact that I'd been given this knowledge about the silver birch, the energy of silver birch. And of course, I came back and realized that this was the figure of 8. So our 10th formula has no beginning and it has no end. It's infinity. It is Superfit 10, injury, 111, and it vibrates together with flower formula 1. So Superfit 10 and flower formula 1 makes 1110, 110, and 111 is the infinity, the nanometer of silver. So that blew me away, and this formula became incredibly important. And then I went to Wolverhampton to visit the children, the special needs children. And whilst I was there, in the classroom, all the children were painting pictures. They were painting pictures of apples and bananas. There was a fruit bowl. And there was one little boy, because they had them on different tables. different colored tables. And the table, the red table were the autistic children who had special needs, which was quite interesting. And this little boy, was a very small little boy, and he came up to me and he pulled my coat, just like the little entities in the woods, and said, "Miss," and he held up a blank sheet of paper. And in the corner, tiny little sickle moon with a star in the center. And it made me gasp with amazement. And I realized that this was a calling, that this little child had given me the symbol of a faith. And as I left the school, there were all these beautiful linden blossom trees, all in blossom. And I just pulled some of the plants in my hand, the flowers, and put them in my pocket. And literally about 2 days later, I went down to France to stay with one of my plant collectors, one of my practitioners. And she said, the first thing we have to do while you're here down in Provence is to go to the linden blossom ceremony. And again, I said, oh my goodness me. And I opened my hand and I said, linden blossom, I got it in my hand. And she said, it's one of the most precious trees. And there's this wonderful, wonderful village, Puy de Buissonnet, I think it's called. And there they all were, these beautiful, beautiful trees. I said, we must make remedies. And I started to create the special care remedies with her. First of all, the linden tree to protect the children. This is the tree that grows around a lot of the schools. And then the beautiful oak from a 1,000-year-old oak tree, the cedar from a 500-year-old cedar tree, cedar oak, and an olive from a 2,000-year-old olive tree, olive love. And then we found the willow nurture, the walnut trees all out in full nuts. And it was just an exquisite, the apple palm. So all the plants in the special care are from France. And France, the name of France is the hexagon. And these form the formation, the special care are the hexagon formulas. So we'll talk about that on another occasion. But it is astonishing that all of this information comes together in this extraordinary way, but it doesn't quite end there, because I was in Malaysia training a group of practitioners, and it was we were up in this beautiful, beautiful center, and that night was the most incredible sickle moon with a star in the center. And I said to them, this is a message for us, you know, this is we're here for a reason, and we have to go plant collecting. And as it happened, we went to look for plants for fertility and for the Y chromosome, because I said the little boys are being so damaged in the world. And I'm sure that's why we're being called to be here. And then one of the ladies in the class said, oh, I have a book about Archangel Michael's writings, and he writes about 111, the energy of 111. And I went, I think I've been told that before by somebody else, and she showed me the book. And it was very, very interesting, because the symbol of 111 is intriguing in accordance with the energy of the vibrations of the world and planetary symbology of keeping the vibrations of the world stable. And the message was that this was to stop the damage of low emission radiation and 5G and radiation complications. And sure enough, it is incredibly powerful for the support of radiation. So we call this formula spiritual arnica, as well as being so powerful. But these extraordinarily synchronistic stories, these unfolding of the information, the way that they're taken to places and given these plants. And interestingly enough, one of the plants that we found for the Y chromosome was the horrendous palm oil, which is literally devastating in the jungles. But the seed pod of the palm oil is magnificent, and it has a cross in it. It's a seed pod, but it's got a little cross on the top of it. And it's so powerful for support of the Y chromosome. But then we got lost in the jungle and we found the rubber plantations, all overgrown, obviously not being used anymore. And then we discovered that the rubber bean was incredible for the healing of the liver and the gallbladder and all the complications of malaria. So it became very, very important there. But I'm so sure that there's so much more work to be done. There are many more stories to be told. We are constantly being led. And when we're ready, we're taken to places in the world, and sometimes outside our own doorstep. Sometimes the humble little flower that grows outside your own front door has such power and should never be overlooked. So the power of these plants, yes, these stories are really magnificent. And the wonderful thing about our logo is that it is actually the world with the drop in the middle and the flowers all around, forming this connection between north, east, south, and west. So all four corners of the earth being brought together. And that's what I love about these trees, because they come from all over the world, each of them being given to us in a very astonishing way. But this one is particularly extraordinary. So that's the end of this particular story and this particular journey. And so I'm going to stop screen sharing. There we are. And really want to say again, thank you for joining, and hope you found that helpful. And so I'm going to end there and stop the.
Thank you.
Just 1 minute. I'm going to stop the recording. Yes.